Hey, it's Andrew here at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas. We're actually here at the range today in the retail part of the range in the showroom. Brendan's here with us,
Hey guys.
and we're going to do a little bit of something different in this video. It's kind of like an inside the industry kind of deal. Talk about some topics that are in the news that are affecting us, and we're getting a lot of questions about from retail consumers in the range and through the email and the old interwebs and stuff, right? And then some of this raises additional questions that I'm not covering well. Uh, let's figure that out too. So we'll take a few minutes to do that. I think we should probably hit the elephant in the room first with tariffs, right?
Tariffs, yeah, that's going to be a big thing. A lot of uncertainty right now. Seems like they've been changing a lot. So, what do we know, Andrew? What can you tell us?
Here's what we're hearing, and we're kind of in I don't think anybody's in a good position to know, but we get emails pretty regularly from all of our industry partners that we buy from, and fortunately, we have direct relationships with a lot of vendors that are importers, right? So we hear from Tariffs, we hear from SIG on the optic side, we hear from all the various other optic makers that they are anticipating or they are going to implement either some degree of price increase or in the case of Taurus, for example, we got an email that they were going to add a 7% surcharge on invoicing after a certain date coming up, right? So that's just a flat 7% on top of what our normal buy price would be. So it doesn't sound like a lot, right? Except when you consider that in the retail gun world, there's not a ton of markup there. So 7% really takes a lot of the air out of the room when it comes to whether that's a profitable item to stock and sell. So, and we're not alone in this, right? Everyone else that sells Taurus would have to make a decision based on, okay, are we going to not take those orders and wait till things clear out? Because the last thing we want to do is say, okay, we're going to take these orders and then increase our retail pricing to still make a margin. And then the tariffs go away. And now we have overpriced retail items that we end up having to sell at below cost. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a problem and this is not just a gun thing. It's a everything thing.
Yeah. Across all industries, pretty much anybody importing anything.
And if we look at the product lines that are available in the gun industry today, I mean, a lot of the guns behind us are American-made guns, the AR platform guns. But there's guns on this wall from Israel. There's guns on this wall from Turkey. There's guns on this wall from Germany. And in our we have Italian guns in here. We have guns made in Japan in here. And then when we get into the accessory side, that's when it really goes up. And a lot, particularly on the optics, in the optics line, because a lot of that stuff is made overseas and a lot of it's made in China, regardless of what the name is. Obviously, Holosun is all Chinese. There's some interesting articles about their linking with the PRC Army and all that. That's fun reading. I don't know if you've seen that or not.
I have not seen it. I wouldn't be surprised.
That said, though, I mean there are other when we get invoicing, say, from SIG, and it's SIG Optics, it has a country of origin on each line item. And a lot of those, don't say United States. A lot of them do. A lot of them don't. A lot of the glass that are in scopes are made overseas. Almost all the glass is made overseas. There's a company called Light Force in Japan. They make Night Force scopes, but they also provide glass and components for other brands as well, even the brands that are ostensibly made in the U.S., because made in the United States is a legal term. They have to have X amount of components or X amount of stuff done to qualify as being made in the United States. So if you had glass and electronics that are imported in, but you assemble that in Oregon, for example, you could say made in the USA, but it has imported components in it. And if those imported components are subject to tariffs, that's going to affect the cost of producing that scope or that red dot or whatever it is. And that kind of moves along down the chain, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we haven't seen a lot of movement from some of those made in USA manufacturers like Leupold that use glass sourced from other places. It just is. It's not an indictment of Leopold by any stretch of the imagination, a great scope. It's just a part of the industry. Shotguns, for example, the amount of Turkish shotguns on the market now is off the chart. Remington produces shotguns in the United States. It's hard stop.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
there's so much other stuff made in Turkey and Italy, right? Breda Benelli, obviously Italy, right? Then Stoger, Turkey, and there's Winchester pump shotguns or Turkish, Weatherby 18Is, you know, or Italian. There's so much of that stuff imported that it's a big question mark. So the reason I brought up Tariffs with that 7% that's going to occur, and we don't know when or if that's going to stop, pricing becomes somewhat like a commodity, like you would price gold or pork bellies, right? You have to price it on the futures, what the future is going to be. How much is
Okay.
it going to
Yeah.
cost me to restock this product when it's gone? And obviously, the last thing any retailer wants to do is have shelves full of product they can no longer sell because the pricing has went down. So that's tariffs, how tariffs are affecting us in the retail gun world.
Now, I got a quick question for you on tariffs. So the idea here is that we can encourage American made.
Right.
Are we seeing any transition in the industry? Any talk about that?
Not yet.
Okay.
And I had that discussion with people at SIG. I've had that discussion with people at Leupold. And I don't know how long it would take to spin up American glass is the issue. Because the glass from Japan and the glass from Germany that you see in some of the European product like Schmidt and Bender has been the industry standard for, it's not new, it's decades.
Long time, yeah.
And so there hasn't been any impetus to really produce American made glass when it was easier to do it there. So when we get into the electronic rifle sights such as thermals and things of that nature, the germanium that's put in the thermal scopes, very little of that's produced in the U.S. Some is, but not a bunch. Most of that is from Lithuania, from China, things like that. So I don't know which would take longer, spinning up American production of some of these products or resolving whatever the tariff thing is. I think the tariff thing will resolve before any significant industry ramp up on the optics side for the U.S. could happen. That's just my personal opinion. Now, somebody at Leopold or somebody at Vortex or somebody in one of these other places may say differently, but I fully foresee that the tariff situation will resolve or at least normalize relatively quickly. But the big question mark is where is the pricing going to normalize at? So do we see a $149 Zero-Tech optic now is $189 at baseline? It very well could be.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the products, at least from what you're telling me, that are going to be affected the most are going to be in that budget line.
Yeah, yes, and simply from a percentage of price increase, right? Because if you're already buying a $2,600 scope and it's another $150 or whatever that number is going to be, that's not as big a deal as a $40 bump on a $100 object, right? So
Right.
if you look at just a straight percentage of retail,
Yeah.
And not just optics, we buy cases and gun bags and things like that from Allen, and we buy them from Bulldog Tactical. We buy from a few other places, and 100% of that is imported. 100%. It's not all China. Some of it's Malaysia, some of it's Vietnam, some of it's a few other places. But we received another great example. We received a call from our sales rep for the product, and they said, "Hey, you've got a scheduled order for June, but we think there's going to be a tariff hike." So we opted to go ahead and take that product early to avoid the tariff hike, right? which means I'm having to warehouse product I don't normally warehouse. So I've got that space issue that I'm warehousing product I don't normally do. Mm-hmm. So that affects the operation of the rest of the, the rest of the store, because now that room is taken up with that stuff. So there's a bunch of dominoes that fall when we start talking about what changes the tariff situation is making, and how it's going to turn out. We don't know. I mean, we'll have to see, but I hope it shakes out soon, because the uncertainty is worse than the price increase as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, definitely. But that's not the only big change we're seeing in the industry right now. There's some uncertainty in some other areas, some things that might change as far as NFA
stuff, NFA stuff. And one thing that is changing, the bump stock thing, the force reset trigger thing. And today is what, May the 27th, right? Mm-hmm. So May the 16th, DOJ settled the whole force reset trigger thing. And they have stopped, or they've agreed to it. It's an agreement from DOJ that they are not going to classify specifically the rare breed style of force reset trigger as a machine gun, and they've actually going to return the product that's been seized when it's possible. Now, my understanding is if the product was seized as part of a firearm that was used in a crime, they're not returning the trigger. Mm-hmm. But if you were a dealer, if you're an individual and they showed up, knocked on your door and took your stuff, they're supposed to be giving it, or you have to ask to get it back. And there's a way to do that on their website by September the 30th to get that back. So what that means is it's not just a absolute wild, wild west again on force reset triggers. That's not the agreement. The agreement has some caveats in there. So there was a decision made by a federal court in North Texas that defined what the force reset trigger is pursuant to this agreement. So it has to be a force reset trigger, basically the rare breed design, their patent is not going to be considered a machine gun by this agreement. So part of that, and the other part is it can't be put into a pistol. Now, important to note that for the purpose of this agreement, a pistol defines as a magazine in the grip. So an AR pistol does not meet the definition of a pistol for this particular agreement. It does everywhere else, but not this particular agreement. Mm-hmm. So ostensibly, the force reset trigger is okay in an AR pistol under this agreement. So, and bear in mind, I'm not a lawyer, and if I was a lawyer, I'm still not your lawyer. So check this out, and don't just believe a talking head on the internet, including me. Because a lot of folks do the clickbait on the internet and they say, oh, this is legal, that's legal, when it hasn't been completely resolved in the court case yet, like silencers. Mm-hmm. But the whole force reset trigger and bump stock thing, the other part of that agreement is that Rare Breed has to enforce their patent. So, and there was a whole big patent argument going on between Rare Breed and another company that they were also trying to resolve while the ATF thing was going on. So this kind of puts some shade to that too. But what it also means is that if someone comes up with a type of forced reset trigger outside of Rare Breed's patent, ATF could still classify that trigger as a machine gun, and we're back to square one with that. So it only pertains to that one that has a locking bar that forces the trigger to reset when the bolt carries to the rear. The forced reset trigger that
their specific design.
Their specific design, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So there are some limitations, and that just about, I wouldn't say all, the majority of stuff that I've seen on the internet where people are talking about, oh, forced reset triggers are legal again, they just leave it at that. They don't tell you, well, yeah, but, and the but is what changes your name from consumer to defendant, right? So we don't want that to happen. The silencer thing is another deal. So currently, right now, again, today is May the 27th of 2025. The House has passed a portion of HR 1, and that is, a part of that bill is basically Section 2 of the Hearing Reduction Act or the Hearing Safety Act, whatever that was called.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, it was deregulating silencers, taking silencers or suppressors. I'm going to use those terms equally throughout. Just completely deregulating them, taking them off of NFA completely. Originally, they were going to reduce the tax, the transfer tax from 200 to 0,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds like it's all well and good, but you still have to get a Form 4. You just wouldn't have to pay a tax. So a gun rights group and some other people stepped in, and they got an amendment. They got the wording changed to where now it would completely take silencers or suppressors off the NFA completely. No regulations of Form 4473, over the counter, just like a handgun. So, and talking about talking heads on the internet, I can't tell you how many things I've seen on the YouTube and on various other things where the big gotcha headline is U.S. House deregulates suppressors or some verbiage like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they stopped teaching civics in high school or government class or completely forgot schoolhouse, right? I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill, that thing. But it takes more than the House of Representatives to do it. It's got to go to the Senate, get marked up, and the agreement and all that. Then the whole thing gets passed and signed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that part hasn't happened yet. So we're getting phone calls right now saying, hey, I want to come in and buy a silencer now that we don't have to pay the $200 transfer tax and do that. Well, yeah, you do. yeah, you do.
It has not happened yet.
It has not happened yet. But I tell you what, we are seeing a slowdown this within the last couple of weeks.
People are waiting
because people are now waiting, right? And I get it. I probably would too, because what we don't know is if you bought your silencer last week and filed your $200 tax stamp and are waiting for the paperwork to clear, if this passes, do you get your money back? I'm sure there's something in there. I don't know, but I'm sure there's something in there where you would get your money back. But to further that logic down the road, if you did it 6 months ago, do you get your money back? I'm going to go with a no.
Right. Yeah. I would probably say the same thing.
I'm going to go with a no.
I do have a question for you on this. I have heard this, and I don't know if this is true, because this sounds good, taking silencers off the NFA. I'm all for that. But how would state regulations affect this? Would that mean that certain states would have laws that trigger into place banning suppressors that right now they're legal?
They could. I mean, there are 8 states now that don't allow suppressor ownership. So even though the supremacy clause is a supremacy clause, it just means you can't be more lenient than federal law. You can certainly be stricter than federal law. So that's a 10th Amendment issue. And states' rights, for example, this is not going to affect California one little bit, or Rhode Island one little bit, because or any other state, because all the state legislature would have to do is say, okay, that's illegal here. You can't have them here at all. So end of story, right? So it's not something that they can force a state to do, because 8 states now. You currently can't have those. Now, initially, this bill had language in there deregulating short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, and AOWs. Those other classifications of NFA.
Yeah, the short act, I think, portion of it.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, the short act, and they stripped that. The House stripped that language out, leaving only silencers affected by this. So groups are lobbying the Senate to put that back in. So if that happens, then it's got to go back to the House, and then the fight's going to happen over that, or maybe it won't. I don't know. I hope not. And people come in and they talk to us about it, and we say, no, we can't do that, because you're misinformed on what the law is, basically. And they think that means that we are all about keeping silencers on the NFA, and we're not. We're not. We are on the 2A side as much as anybody else is, but here's the thing. We run a business that's controlled by ATF, right? Our license is controlled by ATF. And it's not only the amount of money in this, the inventory that's in this building, it's the livelihood of the 11 people that work here that we have to pay attention to. So all these things like force reset triggers and bump stocks and all this other stuff, we have to wait until we get the specific guidance from ATF that says, hey, it's okay. We're not going to go buy anything else other than that. That just is. So
Yeah, makes sense. And we actually had an audit fairly recently,
we did
which is
too.
typical for any FFL out there. And from what I heard, there's some changes with their posture a little bit with this new administration. Can you talk about that?
100%. And it's a good change.
Okay.
And they've done away with what the Biden administration called a zero tolerance policy, which was basically and just about any significant, and not really even that significant, but any errors done on 4473s, any relatively minor infraction. It didn't have to be something that would harm the traceability of a firearm. It didn't have to be anything that would necessarily transfer a gun to a prohibited person. I mean, those are still to this day. Those are still, you can't do that. You know, or your license is subject to be revoked. But minor stuff, you know, they were moving for revocation of license. Well, that's gone now. So it's kind of back to the good days. Now, I've been in this business a very, very long time. And I remember before the Firearm Owners Protection Act in 1986, and when people talk about that act, the only thing that they really know about or think about or talk about is it created the registry for machine guns for NFA. No, it's a bad deal. But what they don't realize is prior to that act, ATF could show up as often as they wanted. And it was far worse than the no tolerance thing that they had recently. And all that changed with that act. It put some protections into place about they can only come once a year unless there's specific cause for a specific reason. Before that act, if you bought ammunition, if it was something other than rimfire ammunition, we had to get your ID, write your name down in a ledger and keep a ledger in all 50 states, not just California, but in all 50 states. So-and-so, you know, Jim Bob bought a box of 38 special DL number this date. And that all went away. People didn't realize that. And talking about that NFA stuff, people don't realize that the original language of that act includes pistols and revolvers. So can you imagine having to get a tax stamp to buy a Taurus 38 special?
Yeah.
Wow. You know, or a single action Ruger Blackhawk, you had to get a tax stamp for that. That's if they hadn't stripped that out of there prior to passage in 1934, we'd be having to do that. And that would have changed the landscape of the gun culture in America quite a bit. Silencers, though, we still get questions now, even today, about the whole made in Texas, right? House Bill 957, and this pertains to viewers in Texas, right? But this has happened in Kansas. It's happened in a couple of other states as well. Back in May of 2021, Texas passed House Bill 957. Governor Abbott signed it into law, basically said that if a silencer was made in Texas from basic materials in Texas that was never to go out of Texas, it was not subject to any form of federal registration or tax or any of that other business. And people lost their collective minds because they thought that meant that they could just make and sell and buy silencers just free without any kind of registration in Texas. And it's completely against federal law. That's an actual law. The NFA is an actual law passed by Congress in 1934. And the state can't override it. The supremacy clause is a supremacy clause. That's just it. And the way the bill was worded is if you wanted to make a silencer, you could tell the Attorney General of Texas, hey, we're going to make this silencer. And the Attorney General would basically sue the federal government and say, hey, they're not subject to this tax. They shouldn't be subject to this tax, right? Well, so they tried it. In 2023, court in the federal judge in Texas ruled against it because they argued that neither the plaintiffs nor the state of Texas had any standing to bring the suit because there was no harm. They were not prescribed from doing what they were wanting to do. They just had to pay the tax to do it. So it got chunked. So they appealed it. The state and the plaintiffs appealed it to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit says, you're crazy. It's not happening. You know, we're done. See you bye. So it's never been law. I don't know that it's ever going to be law. It's unclear right now as to whether they're going to try to advance that beyond the Fifth Circuit, if this is going to become a Supreme Court thing. But I can't imagine the Supreme Court even wanting to hear it, because it's pretty clear on its face. So I would think. So the Texas silencer thing, now there are silencers made in Texas. There are quite a few companies in Texas that make silencers legitimately, and they're marked and they're registered, and you've got to go through the same stuff you would on a Surefire that's made in, of all places, California.
Right.
I don't understand that at all. But Surefire's out there, Abel's out there, whatever. I don't know why they don't move to Texas. That would be great.
Yeah, there's lots of room out here for your Surefire.
There would, and that's another thing I've got a problem with Governor Abbott about. How come all these companies are moving out of these restricted states, but not to Texas? They're moving to Tennessee, right? We've got Smith & Wesson and Beretta in Tennessee. Right. We've got to move into Georgia. Georgia even has a booth at the freaking SHOT Show, a big one.
Just for the state of Georgia.
Just for the state of Georgia, trying to get manufacturers to come there. Texas, crickets, freaking crickets. Wow. No state income tax in Texas. Large deep water port in Texas.
Yeah.
Tons of land.
Yeah. Doesn't make any sense. Surefire.
I don't know.
We got room for you out here.
We got room for you. Governor Abbott, get off your, I can't say get off your buddies in a wheelchair. Can't do that. It'd be Jasmine Crockett all over again. Get on the stick, Governor Abbott. Get your people to start courting these fire manufacturers to come to Texas. We need more of that stuff here.
But it sounds like these made in whatever state laws, they're trying to get out of the federal jurisdiction, and it's just not working out.
Just not working out. And it's kind of like the whole short barrel rifle thing, right? With the braces, the pistol braces with short barrel rifles. Those were a thing, right? For people with some type of disability that they need to be able to handle the large frame pistol, that for some kind of physical issue couldn't hold them out, and they had to have them stabilized on their shoulder. Okay. And then everybody and their cat started making videos with them out there running and jumping and climbing fences and being super ultra tier 1 operators with their braced pistols. And for some reason, they didn't think that was going to come back on them, and it did. But ATF did it in such a stupid way. ATF made a stupid rule with a big stupid chart that didn't make any sense.
Right. I remember all that.
Instead of going to Congress and having Congress codify braces, as SBRs. If they'd have done that, they'd have probably gotten it passed. Or at the very least, if they'd have said, okay, if you want to have a pistol brace on your AR pistol, you have to get, similar to getting a handicap placard for your car, you have to get some kind of something like that. If they'd have done that, it would have passed. They didn't do any of that. So now, basically, once again, and here's the thing about braces. The DOJ has said, okay, just because you have a brace on your AR pistol, we agree that does not make it a short barrel rifle. That's where that statement stopped. And that's true. You're not in possession of a short barrel rifle. So if you're out there running and gunning and firing it from the shoulder, even though it doesn't say anything in the law or the statute about firing from the shoulder, have you made or designed or remade or redesigned that firearm to be fired from the shoulder, which is the actual wording in the definition of a short barrel rifle. So there are some good YouTube folks that do this. They're primarily attorneys. Again, I am not. There's one called Armed Attorneys, Washington Gun Law. There's a few of those that actually go into this. And he made, and the one of the armed attorney things on this subject with the short barrel rifles made a good point that if you are out there running and gunning and on social media and all over the place using that braced pistol as a stock, I think you are really putting yourself in danger of having that charge of having an unregistered short barrel rifle. So, somebody's got to be the test case. It's not going to be me. And that just is what it is. Now, I can almost guarantee you that if you do something criminal aside from having the braced pistol and you do something criminal with that from the shoulder, they're going to tack that on there. They're going to tack that on there as an excuse to get federal government involved, that you have an unregistered short barrel rifle as defined by the video from the bank surveillance camera, So
right.
or whatever the case may be. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Again, not a lawyer. Did not stay in the Holiday Inn Express last night. If I was a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer.
Guys, don't underestimate the power that the government will take, basically to infringe on our gun rights here. We're not necessarily saying that we don't support these things. There are serious legal ramifications that need to be considered when you are looking at some of these things, like the AR pistols, force reset triggers, and there's just a lot to consider because it can still be very murky today.
Right. And we're not against it. We're not carrying force reset triggers right now because they haven't produced anymore. They're still out of stock on their website as far as rare breeds concerned. I checked this morning. So will we carry them in the future? And we'll see. We'll see if there's a demand for it. We'll see, what that is. We sell binary triggers, but there's relatively small demand for that stuff because, once you look down at that big pile of brass that's on the floor, you say, "Oh crap, how much money was that?"
Yeah, right.
So anyway, we just thought we'd come on here and do something a little different, do kind of a hot topics of what's going on in the firearm industry right now from a retailer's perspective, right? So it's a little bit different because a lot of these guys, these YouTubers that are on here, they don't have to worry about the livelihood of the people that work for you and how much money is invested in inventory here and the land and all that other stuff. And what happens if you do something profoundly stupid and ATF stomps a mud hole in you, then what happens? And we have to look at it from that perspective. So it's just what that is. But if you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell thing that I'm told by people that know more about computers than me that tells you that another video has been, isn't that what it does?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a notification so that when we make a video, it pops up that we dropped another video for you guys. So
yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that way you guys know right away. So, but yeah, thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it. Any questions or comments, leave them below. We always enjoy hearing back from you guys. And with that said, take care. Stay safe.
Yep.